Here's my first note card. There's my second note card. And here are my individuals, and Danielle will be recording me again today. Here we go.
Good job. Police.
Okay. How many times do you reach into the refrigerator and grab a bottle of apple juice when you're thirsty? Or how many times do your kids ask you for a glass of apple juice? Probably a lot. Would you still give them the juice if you knew you were poisoning them? Because according to Dr. Oz, that's exactly what you're doing. There is no FDA limit to how much arsenic is allowed in apple juice. There is, although, a limit to how much is allowed in water, and that's 10 parts per billion. There are two types of arsenic, according to medterms.com. There's organic, which occurs naturally in plants and animals, and it's not quite as bad as inorganic. Inorganic is the type that causes cancer and tumors. Dr. Oz reports about a study that he conducted. He picked 5 of the leading brands of apple juice in the United States and took 3 dozen samples from each. 10 of these samples tested higher than 10 parts per billion arsenic. Mott's had 16 parts per billion. Apple and Eve had 11 parts per billion. Juicy Juice had 22 parts per billion, and Gerber had 36 parts per billion, which is crazy if you think about the limit for water, which is 10 parts per billion. That's more than 3 times the limit for Gerber apple juice. Consumer Reports backed Dr. Oz's claim. They are asking the FDA to put limits on how much arsenic is allowed in apple juice. They suggest making it 5 parts per billion, and they are even asking to go higher and try to get it 3 parts per billion, since so much apple juice is consumed. Fox News reports that the FDA tested 134 samples from the years 1991 to 2009. Of these samples, a quarter were higher than 10 parts per billion. 5% had 23 parts per billion. A spokeswoman from the FDA said that these results were below a level of concern, which is contradicting because their level of concern is 10 parts per billion for water, but they're saying that 36 parts per billion is not a concern. There are many reasons to be concerned about arsenic poisoning. Arsenic poisoning can blend in with other diseases, so when you are diagnosed, they don't even think to look for arsenic. A lot of doctors are not educated as to what arsenic does. CBS News correspondent Dr. Joshua Hamilton quotes, "Many diseases likely to be increased by exposure are so common that the effects of arsenic poisoning are overlooked simply because no one has looked closely enough at them." The fact is that arsenic has a huge effect on our health, and there should definitely be FDA standards. Consumer Reports says a study done in Bangladesh on children who had drinking water with arsenic 5 parts per billion had lower test scores than those who had no arsenic in their water. In Texas, they did another study that showed the correlation between having arsenic in their groundwater as to having low brain function in the area. Juice is definitely a drink of choice for many Americans. Fox News states that 35% of kids drink more than 6 ounces over the suggested limit by pediatricians a day, which is a lot. And they also say that the average American drinks about ½ an ounce a day. So over a lifetime, that's a lot of juice you're consuming, which means that's a lot of arsenic you're consuming. To conclude today, I would just like to say I hope you agree that these are very disturbing facts, and people should take a stand against the FDA and have them put limits on this for ourselves and for our kids. We want to be healthy, we want our kids to be healthy, and there is no dispute that arsenic is not healthy for us. It causes health problems, it causes cancer, so many things that could be prevented if there were limits. I'll leave you today with a quote from Dr. Manny Alvarez. He's the Fox News Chief Medical Editor. He said, "I don't want to sound like an alarmist, But just look at the growing levels of learning disabilities, autism spectrum disorders, and other diseases that are so prevalent today that decades ago didn't even exist. So, thank you all for listening to my speech today. I hope you enjoyed it.